Hey everybody, Dale Jr. back again for another episode of the Dale Jr. Download. It's the Ally Guest segment, and today our guest is David Hoots. David Hoots was race director for NASCAR for many, many years. He's got some great history in this sport, over 30 years doing that job. So eventually, though, that comes to an end. We're going to learn all about that. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's get David into the room and start the show. The following is a production of Dirty Mo Media. All right, so we're getting ready to start another episode of the show with David Hoots. He's outside, and we're going to bring him in here in a minute. I want to thank Ally for bringing our guest segment to us every single week. And Ally does such a great job supporting us here at the Dale Jr. Download and all across NASCAR, sponsoring Alex Bowman and doing all kinds of great things for the sport. And, we're all better off with an ally. And David Hoots, I think he's an ally. I mean, we were kind of on opposite sides back when he was involved in the sport. He wasn't out there to help me win the race. He was just out there to make sure we had a good, fair race called, and he did a good job. In my opinion, he did a really, really good job. I've learned, though, that maybe his, the end of his career as race director for NASCAR didn't go as he had hoped. And we'll learn a lot about that. But I also want to see, kind of what he remembers from some of the bigger moments in his career and what he might be able to shed in terms of taking us behind the curtain a little bit on how that job is done. And his opinion about today, where NASCAR is as a sport, what he likes, doesn't like. Will he be transparent about that? Well, let's find out. Let's get David in the room. First off, thanks for coming today.
Well, appreciate you having me.
Yeah.
I watch some of the podcast and find some of them interesting.
Good.
And usually I'm not a big social media fan, but people say, well, your name was mentioned. I'll go over and find out, okay, what are they
talking
saying
about? 100%, I would too.
Yeah.
So, man, it's going to be fun to talk to you today because I don't think we've ever really sat down and had much of a conversation. We've had some moments over the years, but, and I know you're still kind of out there doing, staying busy, but, first off, I guess, how much do you watch these days?
I typically limit it most of the watching to Sundays.
Yeah.
Just time-wise.
Yeah.
A lot of times with what I'm doing in the regional levels, I'm gone on Saturday nights or whatever, so I don't get to see the Xfinity races like maybe I once did.
Yep.
And then I kind of watch what's going on Sundays with the Cup.
Yeah. And I wonder if when you watch a race, do you watch it differently than maybe I might watch a race?
I'm sure I do.
Yeah.
I'm looking for the technical correctness of the officiating.
Yeah.
Which is kind of how I had to watch the races from even before I got to the Cup level.
Yeah.
When you were at a weekly track and you being the chief steward, you were basically the head referee, and you were watching it for the correctness of how it did, and the other thing, that how efficient it's being ran.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody ever paid to come watch officials officiate. I know watching football and basketball, and I'm a big basketball fan, call the foul, let's put the ball back in play and go back and get on with it. And that was kind of ingrained into me, especially as we went down the unified TV contract. We need to be efficient with our cautions. We can't be running 10 and 12 lap cautions cleaning it up. And when you would compare it to, say, IndyCar, and it's a totally different animal of how they have to clean a racetrack up to where a stock car, it was painful to watch. So you look for ways to be more efficient, and then again the correctness of the officiating.
Do you prioritize managing the actions of the drivers or disciplining drivers? Is when you defined your role back in the day, how responsible were you for sending a message to a particular driver?
Well, let's kind of expand on that. There was a team of us in race control.
Yep.
It wasn't just one person. Naturally, you would hear me make about 95% of the radio calls. But in theory, I was running the race for the series director, and we had input with the vice president of competition at the time. So I was fortunate. We had a really solid team between Gary Nelson or John Darby, Robin Pemberton, and Mike Helton. And collectively, we would be working together as a team along with the other officials up there.
Yeah.
No one person can watch the entire racetrack. So as this team, if you will, with a massive amount of experience would be watching the race, you had to trust what somebody said. Whether it's in Darby's case, he would elbow me. That was a cue. You need to put the yell out. Okay, I'd trust him.
Yeah.
Now we messed up that one day at Dover, and we did that. And I said, John, I don't think we should.
What happened?
Leader pitted and spun on pit road. We put the yellow out. So for a while we didn't have a leader, which this is before racing back to the flag, and it threw the race in chaos. And we tried to reconstruct it and put it back together and correct the errors. But at the end of the day, he said, I don't think I'll ever do that again. He said, I don't care for cars on fire, barrel rolling down the pit road. So you learn, but you have to trust those. Same way with you would have to trust what people were telling you on the racetrack.
Yeah.
If you're 3/4 of a mile like you were at Talladega from turn 1 where race control was at to turn 3, you've got to trust what somebody's telling you is back there.
One of your spotters.
One of your spotters, one of the cleanup trucks, one of the fire trucks. There were several different methods of communications. Talladega and Daytona were notorious for the Sunoco arrows that they'd have observers up there.
Yes.
And I think some of that has kind of gone away, which is kind of disappointing because
like the old Unical balls.
Correct. Yeah.
And so when you watch races today, what do you think you see that you think should be different? Do you see anything where you're like, you said it's unfortunate some of the spotters are not maybe around the racetrack like they used to be, but
I would say that was one. I would say that also probably, and I don't remember what year it was, caught the rain shower at 1 and 2 in Daytona.
Yeah. It's a couple years back.
Because of somebody making a decision of taking that line of communications, whatever. Going back 20 years ago, we had a similar situation down there on the July 4th weekend night race that Dale Jarrett and I believe it was Brett Bodine were in a wreck down there, and where the observers were on the inside, couldn't see them. They ended up walking back. So we took actions to correct that, but it just shows how big an area you can and cannot see from race control, either looking down or from different observers. You need to have these observers to see things.
Yeah.
So I think it's all right to make mistakes. You need to learn from them.
Yeah.
And work on things to correct them.
You were in the booth from the late 80s all the way up until you weren't.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to go all the way back to being born in Winston-Salem, and a common line that we say in this room, you were going to Bowman Gray Stadium on Saturday nights.
Yeah, well, I actually grew up 3/4 of a mile from there.
There's so many of y'all, like industry mechanics, crew chiefs, drivers, that were from Bowman Gray.
Well, if you think about how NASCAR was started, the France family would come up from Daytona, and they would co-promote with the Hawkinses, which is the grandfather of the Garrisons and the Pinellises that are there now, and they've transferred the lease back to NASCAR. They would use the Winston-Salem area as their home base in the summer. So they would travel. You had Hillsborough Speedway, you had Wilkesboro, you had Martinsville, all within a very small area. Hour and a half, you could be to a half a dozen racetracks. So that was kind of the headquarters, unofficially, of a lot of the racing. You still had other areas of racing, whether it be Kannapolis in the Hickory area or whatever, but you're still within that mile range. I got taken over there when I was a young child by my parents. They were both big sports fans. That's what we did on Saturday night. It basically got me hooked, and I've seen some great things happen over at the stadium. I'm excited about the Clash coming there. When we go back 8 or 9 years ago, or probably further than that, when the NHL came out with the Winter Classic, we had a meeting in the offices. What is something that NASCAR could do to kind of follow along the same suit of doing something, a type of throwback? The Winter Classic of playing ice hockey outside. I suggested you run one of the exhibition races at the stadium, and everybody laughed at me. I said, hold it. You got to remember, back in 71, the cars were bigger.
Yeah.
They used to race there.
Mm-hmm.
It's still exciting. It's a different style of racing. It's a little bit more entertainment right now at times.
Yeah.
I also had the great pleasure when I was 11 or 12 of watching Bobby Allison and Curtis Turner when Curtis drove for Junior Johnson in the big it was the Banana Holly Farms,
26.
but he did run the Banana car on the short track, and Bobby had the little Chevelle, his cell phone Chevelle. There was a 427 versus a 350. Something happened, and they got to chasing each other through the football field. So this went back on in 61. I'm not trying to promote that, but it got its name, the Madhouse, realistically. Later on, probably 10 years ago, I had the good pleasure of Bobby walked into the pizza place up at New Hampshire. And I'm by myself, and he's by himself. Hey, come on here and join me. He said, okay, look, I was an 11-year-old child. Tell me what happened.
Yeah.
And he told me his side of it, and it's like I'm a kid at Christmas in the candy store, listening to something I'd watched 50 years ago. Now I'm finding out. He said, well, Curtis would fly in, he would buzz the field, the team would go up to the airport, pick him up, he'd come down there, and I'll leave out some of the details. So if you ever get fortunate enough to get Bobby on here and let him explain it, but it was great to relive that part of it. And then Bobby starts talking about, well, I didn't get credited for a win there, and it's the only win that was not, I said, okay, that's another department you need to talk to. But it was great to sit there and just reminisce about something you'd saw as a child, because you'd wonder about it, what triggered it. And he said, I really don't know what triggered it other than they just got to going at it, and Bobby was one not to back down to anybody.
Yeah, for sure.
So
when you were going to Bowman Gray, what kind of roles did you have?
I started out helping the score.
Why everybody always gravitates to the garage, gravitates to a race car, not you?
Well, at the time, I wasn't old enough to get into the garage to get a permit. It was a way to get in and watch. I could go through and watch something I enjoyed. I was going to be there anyway, and I had this knack of being able to keep up with the cars without writing down stuff. Now, granted, anybody can keep up with the cars in a 40-lap feature, but even on the long-distance race. So that opened the door to get me in. From there, once I got old enough to get a license, I took over the responsibilities of selling the pit passes and understanding those dynamics, and kept working my way up from that to the track steward, to the chief steward, and then directing a few races over there. And then had the opportunity to move into the regional races, which was the late models and the modifieds in the Virginias, North Carolinas, and South Carolina, mostly Hickory and Caraway and South Boston, which back in the day you would run 5 or 6, quote, bush races at each one of them.
Yeah.
But you started elevating.
When did you start doing the hickories and run, messing with around with the sportsman stuff?
Probably first of the 80s.
Uh-huh.
But when you did that, you did dual roles. I probably know more about a 390 carburetor than most people would think that I knew about, because it was one of the things I would have to inspect, or doing the measurements under the chassis, because like that. So I had an interest in the cars. I would gravitate to the cars. I was realistic to know with my size, I would never be a driver because weight was a deficit. And I've never been small. So you can't, I got this saying, you never lose weight. You might misplace it for a while, but you never really lose weight. It'll come back and find you. But I still wanted to be involved with the cars. I think everybody does, because that's the intriguing thing. There's nothing more exciting to a race fan that hasn't heard a race car run at the year, and you go to Daytona and you crank them up there and you let that grumble and growl go through the spectators when they're just sitting there idling. If that doesn't charge you up, I'm sorry, you're not going to get charged up being around this sport.
Yeah.
And then having, at the time, they were big block modified, so you had all kinds of different experiences with the cars. Again, as I was working my way up, and I did it for the fun. I didn't do it thinking it would ever create a job opportunity. And it kind of corresponded with another career that I'd started. I'd got out of high school, went to community college. To say I hated it would be an understatement. But at the same time, when I went from one job to another, I went to work for a place called UPS. And when I went there, I didn't even know what they did.
Yeah.
But it was an increase in pay, and I could work at night, and I was off on the weekends. Well, hey, it's not a bad deal. I can go to the races on the weekends, work some there, enjoy life, and get to where, and one thing led to another.
Yeah. You had that UPS job up until when?
99.
So you've been in the Cup garage and around the Cup industry for a decade and still kept working there.
And a little bit longer than that.
Right.
And what it was, Mike Helton, first off, Coach Richter had listened to me call regional races at Wilkesboro and Martinsville. And he asked me to come try the Cup. And then as Mike came on board, Mike Helton, he wanted me to go full time. I said, "Well, Mike, look, I've got 20 plus years invested at UPS. Let me stay there till I get to a plateau that I'll get some retirement. I don't get the same retirement that the full time guy would get, but you have to be responsible to your family, and so I locked some of that in, and in '99 I transitioned to full time. So for 12 or 13 years, I did dual duty, and it was sometimes 7 days a week.
Yeah, that's impressive. What did you enjoy about working in the Sportsman Modified Series? That's kind of I don't know. I mean, we always look back in the past and go, "Oh, those were the good old days." We do that we'll say that about these days one time down the road. But I always really enjoyed or admired the early '80s sportsman, the transition into the what it would become the what is today's Xfinity Series, but the Busch National Series.
Mm-hmm.
That whole thing got a revamp. They were running, like you say, 50 races a year all over the Southeast on local short tracks, and a big 300 lapper at Charlotte, and then it turned into a true pure series in 1982. I imagine you were around for that.
Yep, we were there, and we went. It gets announced. It promotes two people that had a lot of impact on my career. Lance Childers, Lance's son Kip, director of the car series.
That's right.
And Robert Black, who was a longtime Busch director, and I'd known Robert through Hickory, but
I don't know that Dad was a big fan of Robert's. We ran a few disagreements.
I'm sure that there were several of them. I remember one driver walking into Martinsville, and he was calling out Robert's name at a high pitch. We'll leave it at that. And had some adjectives in behind it, but Robert was influential on helping me and whatever. I took over for Robert at Hickory when he elevated up to the Busch Series. I took over the position up there and at Caraway in the short track. The beauty of it was it seemed like, and I think you can relate to this, it seemed like everybody was having fun.
Yeah.
There was the element of racing, but when the race was over with, people could translate and have fun and enjoy what they were doing. You could run Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday afternoon. You thought nothing about it. They were 200-lap races for most cases. Great racing.
Yes.
When you start Sam Martin, Jack Ingram, and John Settlemeyer, and Harry Gant, and Jimmy Hensley, and I could name 15. Your dad slipping in there. This was great racing. You only had really 3 major races in that category before Busch got involved. You had the Permatex 300 at Daytona, which was kind of a open class to any late model driver.
Yep.
You always got the best there. And then Humpy Wheeler had the 2 300s and did a great job promoting those and bringing it out. The excitement of those 2 and those felt like, for that level race, those were the 3 Daytona races. Then as Busch got involved in the need to get to bigger tracks, you started leaving your South Bostons, your Hickories, your Caraways, and I think that was a shame because that's where real racing is still going on to this day.
Yeah. So I agree with you, man. I've there has been a bit of conversation, I think, in the last handful of years of like, man, it'd be amazing if the trucks or Xfinity could have a race at those racetracks you mentioned, particularly South Boston. I raced there in the late 90s in the Busch Series, and it was just so much fun. And we have to plot forward and continue to grow and go where the demands are, but how we don't pull the roots out of the ground is really important. Mm-hmm. And trying to keep those racetracks alive and successful is even of more importance these days. And I think we realize you know more about this than I do, but when I got into late model stock racing and was going to those racetracks, this was at the same time where Winston was still involved in NASCAR, and Winston did a really good job, at least optically, of being connected and keeping the top series of NASCAR and what would be the Busch Series at the time connected and intertwined to that regional racetrack. Even the ones that didn't have a Busch race, you'd go anywhere in the Southeast and see all of the red and white Winston paint on the walls and signage. So they were investing in these local tracks, even though their main series wasn't running there. That's gone today. Now Advance Auto Parts does some really good work on the side to promote the local racetracks. But for the most part, those tracks have kind of been left to fend for themselves. I've had the chance to spend a lot of time at some of them here in the last couple of years and seeing how hard those promoters are working to keep the Florences and the South Bostons open and functioning is and now I'm sure it was always kind of that tough, of a road, but it's hard to watch sometimes.
It's painful. I think Winston, because it was a national brand, didn't just look at the Southeast. They looked at all the tracks, and at one time there was probably over 100 short track programs under the Winston banner through NASCAR, and that gradually walked away. They had significant cash flow from some of the things that had been mandated by them, but they also felt like a customer was a customer was a customer. Personally, I don't think they've gotten the credit over the years that they deserve at that level or even at the cup level. And I'll point to the product or the ability of the product of that it was a point of sale product. You could walk in and I'm not talking about the dangers that are involved in smoking, but it was a point of sale product that you could find it anywhere. You could find it at a gas station. You could find it at a curb market. You could find it in a vending machine. As that left away and it was forced out, the next series of products kind of lost that vision.
Yeah.
The weekly promoter, the ones that were really invested into the racetracks, would put back in. The ones that were under the lease, I think a lease setup hurt some of them because they weren't able to invest back, into their facility.
No.
But Winston would be able to come in there and give them a shot on whether it's a scoreboard, whether it's the red and white paint, whether it was sponsoring one or two big events each year. There was a big master plan there to help it, and they were also involved in GT racing. I think back with the pre-branded IMSA era and GT racing, and then they also had the golf and the rodeo. So they were sports under sports marketing enterprises. They were in a lot of different areas, but the weekly tracks have really, in some cases, fallen in neglect, and that's a shame because, I think we're all enjoying the revival at Wilkesboro.
Sure.
I hope that Rockingham has the same impression on the fans down there, and even Bowman Gray to some point. That is what happens at Bowman Gray is that it's generational fans that have been going there their entire life. And you go, well, there's grandma and grandpa that's been sitting there for 40 years, and you can see it. Also, the longevity of the drivers that are racing. Now, you got drivers that's got a following of 25 and 30 years, where today you may have that driver in some kind of late model or straight stock. It's 3 or 4 years. He hasn't built up that following.
Sure.
They benefit when drivers like you and Harvick can come in, that you've got a built-in following. It comes in and it helps them that way. I think that's been lost, and everybody needs to work real hard to recover that.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com/Dale. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of NASCAR. 21 plus and present in North Carolina. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 877-718-5543 or visit morethanagame.nc.gov. You moved into the Cup Series. Your debut was at Rockingham in 1988. Do you remember how that comes about? I mean, is this something you're working toward, or is this was there somebody that couldn't make it that day, or how did that all trigger?
Well, first off, I never thought I could make a career path out of this. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'd been doing the regional races. the week before the Cup was at Wilkesboro. Coach Richter calls me and he says, "Hey, can you do the Cup race since you're going to be there Saturday at Wilkesboro on Sunday?" "I'd like to, Cup, the coach, but I'm committed to go up to Pulaski and do another modified race, and I think Tuesday night's a little late to be backing out on a man that you gave your word to." He said, "Okay, well, let's just pencil you in for Rockingham. Would you be interested?" So there was a week between Rockingham and Wilkesboro, and it was a miserable week and a half.
Yeah. Who was doing this job?
It had changed a couple times. It started out, Bill Gazaway primarily did it.
He did that for Gazaway was doing it in '79 at Daytona.
Mm-hmm.
What is other than I know and recognize the name, and I know that he's the guy that flips he's on the broadcast in Daytona, that incredible 1979 Daytona 500 that's so important to us. What's the general reputation of Bill Gazaway? Bill
had a military background, so he was somewhat militaristic, which means that, we're going to follow a procedure and we're going to do it this way. At the same time, people were seeing that we needed to transition some things to take some of the pressure off his job. When I say Bill was running the race, he was running the race, the emergency equipment, everything. And we had a problem one day at Charlotte with the radio failure, and I ended up doing that in a sportsman race with her. It's maddening.
Yeah.
Try to keep up with what this is doing and what that's doing. So the end goal was to divide the two responsibilities and work together.
Competition and safety.
Mm-hmm. And make both of them grow. Bill had gone from competition director to vice president of competition, and they'd brought in Ray Hill.
Mm-hmm.
And Ray came back and helped the Busch Series back in the mid-'90s, and Ray's a great guy. And then Dick Beatty came on board.
Mm-hmm.
Dick was working there. Dick was another hard-nosed, straight shooter, but military.
Yeah.
And with his background down at the airport, he's trained. It's got to be done this way.
Yeah.
Now, he was a bulldog, but he was a fair bulldog.
Yeah.
I mean,
he was I remember him. So I was too young to have been able to be around Gazaway much, but Beatty was intimidating, and I will say we've made some comments on the show over the past couple of months, like you were too, and Mike Helton was, and I always felt like that when that was in the room, we were in better shape. The drivers on the track, and to an extent the mechanics, had to have a level of not only respect but a bit of fear almost of what the repercussions might be if they upset the booth. I don't know whether we have quite enough of that these days, but we'll get to that down the road. But I just wanted to people that are listening to know that Beatty was in. Daddy might have felt differently about it, but Beatty to me was kind of a pretty tough guy you didn't want to play with.
You're correct, but he was fair.
Yeah.
I remember one of the first races that I worked for Dick at Talladega. The cars were lining up, going down the back straight, and they were 3 or 4 wide, getting ready to go into the restart. It was double file, but not the format that's used today. Dick is pounding on the glass in the booth. Dick, calm down, because I was afraid the glass was going.
Yeah.
Calm down. I'll get him in order, Dick. Just calm down and let me go to work over here. And we were sorting them out, and we got them straightened out and whatever. But he was fair. He was tough. But when it's time to take that red hat off that had Winston on it, he was just like anybody else. And he was a good-natured individual, like I said, fair, by the book, and that's what has to be.
Yeah.
If it's 5 o'clock and it's closing time, it's 5 o'clock, it's closing time. It's not 5:15, or we're not going to negotiate it. And I think that's some of the things that's probably being missed right now.
Yeah. I love Elton Sawyer, and I think he's a great, great guy. But I told him even here a couple days ago, or we was on the phone, and I said, man, you've got to. He's almost a little too kind and soft spoken, and just trying to make sure everybody's on the same page. And I always say that, man, I really missed the Bill France Jr. going, we're gonna race today. This is how we're gonna do this race, and everybody want to race, or if you don't want to race, go on, you can go on out the gate. But like, here's the show, and this is what's happening, and everybody get on board. And I think, that was I know that we can't always go back and go, man, we did it like that for 30 years. We can't. But I swear the accountability that demanded from the industry when race directors and series owners and the head inspector, when there was a respect there that just it's hard to replicate. But I often found it in those guys that did have that military past. It seemed to just kind of come out. But I was wondering, when Beatty was around, you used to be able to go over to the NASCAR hauler and walk up in there and see all the cheater parts that were laying on the counter. At Daytona, for example, it seemed like at Daytona everybody wanted to bring out what they dreamed up over the off season. What are some of do you have memorable moments from some of the crazier things that teams tried to pull over on you guys that were just like, I imagine there was a time or two where you're looking at something going, you really thought that you were going to just walk that right through here?
Well, you'd sit there and think about that, and you really said, okay, they knew they weren't going to get that through. So that's the decoy. Now, what did they get through?
Yeah.
It was, I won't say it was a game, but it was somewhat of a game. I'm sure you've had people on here tell about the 40-pound radio or the helmet or whatever.
Right there, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Or this, it's okay. You got caught on this. Now you put five items in the car. They caught 3. What 2 did you just miss?
Yeah.
And so you would think that would be going on.
Yeah.
And I think that was some of the camaraderie, the respect. You got caught. Okay, I got caught. And the homologated car that they have today, I think, is taking a lot of that away from it.
Yeah.
I don't have the mechanical background or studied it like a lot of people, and I promise you probably know more about the car now with the input that the engineers could tell you than I would. But I think the car can be solved if we could give up the control of the car long enough for the garage to figure it out, to make it a little bit better raceable than what it is right now. That's the masterminds.
You're right.
But when you look at people back in the day, and you talk to Leonard Wood, he's a genius. Now, he doesn't have this mechanical degree that the engineers that are sitting on the pit box, but you can sit there and watch him, or you can watch Lenny and Ed take a piece of paper and they're figuring the fuel mileage. We miss that.
Yeah.
You could take some of the drivers, and I won't name names, but couldn't read or write, but they could tell you every nut and bolt on that car. I need a 9/16 wrench, and I'm going to turn it 2 rounds into whatever. So they knew what they're doing. They probably didn't know they were dealing with geometry and trigonometry when they were doing all this, and they didn't have a computer to do it, but they were doing it by laying up under the car and thinking about it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that that your dad, your granddad, and many others proceeded through this like it. So I think we kind of missed that. I know I was out there in your lobby watching an older race, and I'm sitting there watching. How can people say, and everybody, I respect everybody's, but how can people say that wasn't good racing? There was 5 Hall of Famers in there, 3 car links, 2 on the inside and 3 on the outside, going around Dover, 50 laps into the race.
Yeah. That's
good racing. And I miss seeing that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people miss seeing it if they will just admit to it.
Yeah. Now I like what you said about the experts or the guys that build these cars, the guys that work on them every week are the ones that can solve some of the problems. And we come off of a race at Bristol that was just, it drives home the point that we've at least can say that we've got some serious concerns with the short track package and how this car races, how the next gen currently races on the short tracks, and who and what the answer is to fixing it. I don't think anyone really has an idea. I certainly don't.
Well, I think if it was a quick fix, somebody could figure it out.
Somebody would do.
I watched the Bristol race, and I have a feeling if me and you were sitting in the grandstand, and by no means am I blaming anybody, because I'm appreciative to be able to watch the races and the effort that the broadcast companies put into it. If the broadcast hadn't been tailored to the playoff instead of to the race, because all they were showing the majority of the race was this guy's in, this guy's out.
Yeah.
This guy 2 laps down. Okay, I get it. That's part of the story. But when I was on the team that created the original chase, we were given a couple of rules or suggestions. We wanted the race to remain the focal point, not the playoffs, or not the chase at that time, now the playoffs.
Yeah.
So if you had covered the race differently and not focused on that and said, look, he's running this line, and they showed one time that, I forget who, Larson passes a car over 10 laps side by side, 2-footed a lap.
Yes.
I mean, now, the car, he's coming from a car length and a half back, going past him, getting in front of him, and he's gaining 2 laps. That's pretty doggone good racing. We just didn't see a lot of that.
Yeah.
We saw X's here, and I think some of it is you're taking close-up shots, and you're not getting the true perspective. If I'm there watching, and I want to see Junior come from the out of turn 2, and he's running down the car in turn 3, I want to see how much it is. Granted, I can look at it as a stopwatch.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But
visually,
I need to see it visually. I don't need to see it mechanically with a stopwatch. Now, I get the difference, and a lot of people, but that's what's kind of being missed.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of stage racing. Again, I respect people that like it. I don't see a flat out run from start to finish. I'll go back to the 300s that Humpy Wheeler had at Charlotte. Great races. They came in there one year where we're going to spice it up. We're going to run heats, and we're going to have a halfway break. Well, only way heats make something interesting, you got to have a high car count. If everybody's in,
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It is a wasted effort that costs somebody a lot of money, and then when somebody messes up, it messes up the entire race. The second thing, and we'll use the 300. Halfway was 100 laps. If I tell you I'm running 29s, and Dale, I want you to run 29, you'll never get lapped in that 100 laps. So am I racing to win, or am I racing not to lose? And I think that's part of what we're kind of in this thing with, that knowing that there's coming that yellow at a certain point, I'm racing that point. Everybody says, oh, it's great strategy. I'll say this. When's the last time you took your wife out on date night and went and watched a chess match?
Yeah.
it's a great strategy game, but is it what you want to see?
Yeah.
No. I get there's some strategy there, but we're seeing the same strategy every week.
Yeah. I want to know, back to your career, back to getting in the booth, were you handed the reins entirely right out of the gate to direct the race? Is it like, hey, man, you know, I guess what I'm asking is it seems like there's a bit of a training process for the men and women who work in the booth at this time in NASCAR. There's, you know, and you had that either purposely or not, working up through the regional ranks and so forth. But when you go to Rockingham, you said it was a miserable week and a half waiting on that race to start.
One, I didn't know if I had the job full time or whatever. Two, okay, if I go down and fail, I don't want to make a big deal about failing.
What were you worried about failing on?
Didn't want to make a mistake.
Yeah.
Because your mistake affects too many people. Mm-hmm. You're going to make mistakes at this job. There's no way anybody out there is not going to do it. You're going to didn't want to make a mistake. You were doing it at a level that you had never participated in. Let's take you when you're running late models and somebody put you in an F1 car.
Yeah.
You would want to go make a mistake.
Did you have to speak in front of all the drivers at the drivers' meeting?
No. Beatty did the drivers' meeting. He covered the ground rules to the racetrack. And we were still racing back to the flag, and we didn't have nearly as many rules.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the things about Bowman Gray, and some tracks had started transitioning to some type of modified freeze in the field, Bowman Gray was still racing back. Now, I will tell you, racing back is the simplest form of racing. One line, black and white, you either be X'd here or there. Everything else is subjective. Freezing the field is a subjective method. Yeah. Doesn't matter how much electronics you put into it, it's still going to be subjective. So you're going out there, but now you're doing it at a level that I'm sure you can comprehend it, but you're also nervous about it. So I didn't want to tell anybody. I would do things at UPS on my route, and I wouldn't tell anybody what I did on the weekend. Now, somebody asked me, I wouldn't deny it, but I felt like when I was at UPS, I was working for UPS, and we weren't going to talk racing. But they would be the one that would figure it out, or they'd ask you something, and I'd try to explain to you what the rule is and why we made the ruling. But I felt like, UPS, you're working UPS. Mm-hmm. Over here, you're working for NASCAR. Keep the two separate. Nobody can get upset about it. So we go there, and I will tell you that the first race felt like I was sitting in the electric chair with a vein in my arm and a rope around my neck. Okay, and I've got Les Richter sitting there, and I've got Bill France Jr. sitting there.
Oof.
And you've got 3 or 4 experienced other people in there. And these are people that you knew them from a distance, never really had a conversation with them.
Yeah.
Other than I had worked some cup races when the Bush was there. We would stay over and work on Sundays. I knew Beatty, had talked to him, but nothing at this level, you know. So what have I got myself into? And we start the race and run the race and have a pretty good weekend. Then we go.
Went smooth?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Luckily I got to do the Saturday race, which was a Bush race, which kind of warmed you up.
Yeah.
But it wasn't Bill Jr. and Beatty. It was Coach and Robert Black, and I had a better relationship with those two, where Coach had been out there when he'd traveled to the Bush races. You'd kind of get to know him. Incredibly smart person. And Robert, I'd had a long-term relationship with him. So it was a little bit easier. It kind of ramps you up, but you're still sitting there, okay, now I did this one, didn't have no big problem. Did this one, what would you do right, what would you do wrong, and whatever. And you were always self-critiquing yourself.
Yeah.
So we go from there. We go out to Phoenix the first time.
The very first race.
Very first race that the Cup had been out there.
Yeah.
They'd been running some kind of winter classic with West, and but it was totally different than what we did. And then we ended up the season in Atlanta. I don't hear anything from anybody over the winter. I make my reservations to go to Daytona, and I'm going to help Robert and them with the bush inspection. We're about 3 or 4 hours before the, I reckon it was the Clash.
Really? You're already down in Daytona? It's February? You still haven't heard anything?
So I say, hey, Robert, am I going to be doing this or not? What do you mean? I said, nobody's talked to me. So we get in the car and we ride over to Coach's office. Yeah, okay. So I'm in, I'll call them a work uniform. Back then it was a pair of blue jeans and a dirty, greasy shirt because you'd been inspecting race car. And I go up there and walk in Daytona with a radio, and I've never seen the inside of this place. And Daytona is intimidating because it's so big. Now I will tell you, Daytona is actually easier than a short track.
Because you got time. You
have time. We studied later on that there's 32 steps in a simple caution. And what we were trying to do is do a checklist.
Yeah.
So we didn't miss anything.
So there's 32 things you needed to happen.
You needed to happen like that. Okay. So we tried a checklist. And this was a suggestion from one of the higher ups. And when we did it about the third time we did it, Darby takes the pencil, throws it across the room, and says, I can't keep up with his fast because he was supposed to be confirming it. And we kind of figured, okay, and we'll put it in aviation terms, is that I don't want the pilot that has to look at the checklist to figure out what to do. I want the pilot to see the mountain, puts the throttle forward, and either pull up or look for the right or left and try to dodge this thing. And the cadence has to be there. And as the thing grew with closing the pit road and all this other stuff, you would ask a question of scoring, and I would, here's the caution car, blah, blah, moving all this stuff around, and I would draw a breath, and I would be asking, confirm scoring, here's the free pass. The scorer knew he had about 2 seconds to answer because I'm going to hammer that radio and go back to doing what I was doing. Mm-hmm. But we had it that smooth that it worked, and a lot of it is the credit to the discipline of the people on the other end of the radio because it requires discipline. You can't go in and just anybody talk randomly. It's disciplined, it's controlled, but you also had to keep your cadence the same way. And you take your spotters; they get used to that cadence, they get used to that. They know what's coming, so nobody's got a surprise, and it worked out. So you go to Daytona, and the only difference is economy to scale. You have 2 cleanup trucks at Wilkesboro, or at a long time, 1 at Martinsville.
Yeah,
you got 4 down there. You didn't have the fire trucks because the separation of it, but you were working with the guy that was dispatching. And for a long time at Daytona, that was Jim Bachhoven, who reminded me so much of my dad. It was scary. Bachie to Bill Jr., they'd grown up together. It wasn't Mr. Francis, Billy. Yeah. But he could get away with it. Nobody else could. But he was straightforward. He'd just shoot straight with you. And so you'd get there. He'd get his stuff out there, and they're not moving, but the cleanups and the vacuums and stuff are moving. So you don't want to take that away from the spotter's ability to hear it because they're having to tell you, the driver, this is getting ready to happen. So it's controlled chaos. But you had all this equipment down there. You got 2 fence trucks and 2 safer barrier trucks and 4 cleanups and 8 jets and 2 vacuums and a partridge and a pear tree and 2 chase vehicles and 40 people on pit road. So it's different. But once you get it all working and it's working smooth with a bunch of dedicated people, that were experienced, it's not hard.
Yeah. I had a moment, I think the biggest moment that I might have had with the booth was probably at Bristol. And I've told that story a few times where me and Tony Sr. got called back to the hauler because somebody broke a rotor and there's a bunch of parts on the track and it was 15 laps to go. Our team had done something and taken our 5th place car and put ourselves in about 13th. And I needed all the laps I could get to try to get back into the top 10 and get what I thought I deserved in a result that day. And we were running caution laps, cleaning up debris, and I was raising hell over the radio. And apparently I'd gotten in Helton heard or whatever. Someone in the booth had heard, and I was asked to come to the hauler after the race. And I went in there I was going in there to plead my case. I have a problem with what y'all were doing. We should have red flagged it. Why were we burning laps? I ran out of laps in the race. I didn't get to do what I wanted to do. And I was ready. And Helton walks in and says, "You aren't talking. You're going to shut up and I'm going to talk." And that was a really interesting experience. And it changed my whole view of the way I looked at the booth. Do you remember moments like that throughout your career where, I know there's things that it's hard not to take things personal. You're not supposed to. You try not to. But give me some examples of some times when things did get frustrating, when you had to take a guy to the side, a driver after the race or a crew chief or whatever, and sort it out.
Yeah, one comes to mind real quickly. I had black flagged Jimmy Spencer. I know you're shocked. I had and listen, I got along great with Jimmy and his whole family through the connection with the modified, and then later on when they moved up to Bush. This was when he was in Travis's car, and they were running the Smoking Joe's car. Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna catch it from my friends at Winston. Okay. So he comes down pit road at Dover, 23 too fast, tail of the field. Goes back out, 23 too fast. Okay. 3 times. We probably reviewed my entire family history a couple of times, talking about my parents, about me, my job, and whatever. And I didn't take it personally. On Tuesday or Wednesday, I think it was Wingo, called Darby and said, "Hey, we sent the tack back. It was off about 300 RPMs." So we were actually right that he was speeding.
Yeah,
I didn't think nothing about it. And a lot of times that would happen, and I get it. You're emotionally charged. Going back to Jimmy, they would be a car be spun out or whatever. And Jimmy said, "Well, didn't have anything." I said, "Jimmy, let's not talk about it. Let's talk about bank robberies." He said, "What do you mean bank robberies?" I said, if 5 banks are robbed and your picture is in every one of the pictures at the bank, somehow or another, I'm probably going to associate you with the bank robbery.
Yes.
That's all I'm going to say. But I think the world of Jimmy, like I said, his entire family, Ed and his dad and whatever, you didn't take it personal. I had a small relationship with your dad that I would go ask him the next week, how was the racetrack after we did this, cleaning it up? I would get input from the caution car driver, and yes, we had some people that were monitor drivers. I never was listening. I was listening to 2 other things on the radio.
Yeah.
But to hear it kind of from the horse's mouth, did we get this cleaned up right, or was this or whatever? And So I'd go see him.
Yeah.
And I think he appreciated somebody taking the time to talk with him. So he's running on the weekend that he was killed. He's running the IROC race. He spins. He gets turned when he goes through the dirt down in turn 1 in Daytona. He hadn't hit a thing. I don't put the yell out. You ain't hit nothing. You're just. Yeah. He comes back up. He goes from about second to about fourth. Gets back in line. I see him there. He just eating me alive.
Yeah.
If I came in and got 4 tires, I'd have won this race. I could have won this race if you'd throw the yellow. Dale, let's go get a hot dog. And that was the end of it.
Yeah.
But it was bittersweet.
Sure. Were there drivers that you did listen to? I know you said you weren't able to listen to drivers, but were there drivers that NASCAR trusted to listen to or monitor during the races? Was it a consistent group of drivers?
Well, honestly, we had the ability to listen to
anyone.
And you would listen to it with, I'd say, you try to qualify what they were telling you. If the guy was leading and it was raining, well, you know what? Noah's Ark is getting ready to come out of turn 2. We need to stop this thing. Let me win it.
Yeah.
But if it's early in the race, hey, it's still slick down here with this. You need to hit it. You would listen to it. You kind of had to weigh out. Did they have something to gain, or was it just a true concern? And if it was a true concern, take it and run with it.
Do you remember the All-Star race when it was wet down there and everybody went down into one? And
Oh yes. And if you ever get the opportunity to get Kenny Schrader to explain his side of it,
oh my gosh,
you will laugh your butt off.
Yeah. So in that situation right there, who is the one that makes the decision that, hey man, we're going to mash the reset button? Whole field.
We were sitting there, and if I'm not mistaken, it was Gary Nelson, myself.
I didn't hit anything, and I'm thinking, damn, that's half the field. I don't have to race. Go back to the rules that if you throw the red on the first lap, you get a do-over. Oh.
The rules tell you that.
Okay.
Yeah. And so basically, we go down there in turn 1. We don't see the rain coming, and we don't have a spotter down there. And you wouldn't think on a 1.5-mile track you would need 300 yards, but that's how fast it came up there. Kenny is telling the story that he'd ran the open, didn't make it, and he was going around to go up in Condo, and it's raining, and this is before cell phones. He said, well, this is going to be big, and I got no way to call anybody, but Kenny is hilarious telling it. So if you ever get him on here, ask him. But we go down, okay, we haven't completed a lap. We threw the red. The rule book offered that up.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, it was an exhibition race.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes, and we were following the rules, but on the same token,
in that scenario, like I know there was probably a little more time because of the exhibition event, and everybody needed time to get their cars out of the haulers and kind of go through a mock inspection. But are y'all? I know you're not just gonna pull a rule out of your. I'm not. I know that you don't know that rule by heart, do you? Or is it like, all right, guys, what's our options here? Like, here's what the book says. Here's what we can do.
Well, I think this is one thing that's, and I'm gonna deviate just a little bit. I had the opportunity through all the years of either seeing the rule put in place or being a part of the group that wrote the rule, and knowing the reason you wrote the rule, you put it in there. I would take time off from UPS, and we would literally work on the rule book in Daytona or different locations. The term cut and paste into Windows Apple jargon.
Yeah.
This was truly cut up a piece of paper, put a sticky note in it, and rewrite it. And it evolved from each secretary of the vice presidents typing it out, but you would have the same rule written 3 different ways. And over time, we would get them to all read the same. So then the third part of the question is, did you know it that well? Well, that was my focus, was the 2 sections in the rule book, which has been consolidated, the race procedure and the flags and how they interacted. And one of the things that we did about 2015 was we combined the 2. Instead of this rule being here and a continuation of it being over here and some other thing, we worked to put them together.
Yeah.
You knew from your short track days, you don't get the race started. You throw the red, you come back. Now, if you come back to a yellow, race is on.
Yeah, it's began.
It's began. So
yeah, interesting. I mean, there's 100 different scenarios over the years where I was not so much in disagreement with the Booth decision, but curious as to how the Booth come to the conclusion that they come to. For example, and I've really had my eyes open to this, getting involved in the Cars Tour. We just had the issue with at Richmond with Austin Dillon. And I wonder, I guess, your opinion of the ultimate decision. How, if at all, would you might have done it differently in the moment, and or what input would you have infused into the conversation, I guess, and then, to go back and react to it on Tuesday. Not an easy decision to do, but I'm, again, being in the situation with the Cars Tour, I know we're a regional local show compared to the NASCAR Cup Series, but you hate changing the outcome of a race days after the outcome, but sometimes you feel like you don't have a choice.
Let's take the Cars Tour at Hickory, I believe is the race, and apply it to Richmond.
Yes.
At Hickory, and I don't know the car numbers and the names, so forgive me, but the driver is deemed to have wrecked the leader.
Yes.
The call was made instantly. It was done.
Yeah.
Put in Victor Lane, it's over. I think had that kind of judgment been applied at Richmond, it would have been a lot simpler. When you opened yourself up to penalizing them after the fact, you opened up the appeal process.
Yeah.
The appeal process is, at that point, Childress Racing has to get a negative out of the appeals panel. If they appeal it again, they've only got to convince one person that it was wrong. The applying it then
in the moment
is simpler, and it aligns to what I think they've attempted to do the last 3 or 4 years. We want the winner to be the winner when we go home.
Mm-hmm. Is it?
But it all goes back to the technicalities of the rule book.
Yeah. So why is it hard to make that decision in the moment? I mean, I'm not criticizing the choice they made that day. I want to know, as the person that's in that position, why is it hard to be that militaristic, this is fair, this is what's supposed to happen, this is the right thing to do right now, I don't care about the repercussions of this choice?
Well, I can only relate to when it happened to me, not so much Richmond, but it happened a couple of times.
Yeah.
And
you had a race where a guy wrecked somebody on the last lap. And you knew it was most likely an intentional.
It had all the telltale signs.
Sure.
So at that point, the vice president of competition, myself, and the series director talked. Okay.
And you've only got a few moments.
You've only got a very limited time, and at that point, a decision's made, and you live with it.
Yeah.
Okay. You at that time you didn't have technology that's going to tell you all these inputs. I know that when I talked to Parker on their podcast, I said, let me ask you this: did it look like a racing move to you?
Right.
I said, I think that's what's been lost. I hear the drivers say, and I can respect what they're saying, we don't want NASCAR to get involved. The truth of the matter is, though, somebody's got to get involved. Somebody is paid to make that judgment.
Yeah.
Right, wrong, or indifferent, and you live with it.
When you go back to Sonoma with Rudd and Allison, Ricky Rudd dumped Davey Allison in turn 11, or maybe it was 9 with that configuration. But y'all decided on that day, in that moment, to take that. Rudd was not going to win the race. Rudd crossed the finish line first, and then Davey Allison was awarded the win, or whoever else. To be correct about it, Rudd hits Allison. Yeah.
Coming into 11.
Yes.
With about 2 to go.
Right. Wasn't the white flag.
Coming to the white flag.
Sure.
He's black flag. Had he come down pit road, he served his penalty. He could have won the race.
Really? His
penalty was for not obeying the black flag.
Really? Huh. So, all right.
I mean,
no, yeah. No. I didn't know that. Because we all, we put so much water under the bridge, and we go, oh, well, they black flag, they penalized him for doing that.
And at the time, you didn't, I forget the timing, but at the time, you didn't have pit road speed.
No, yeah.
You didn't have, I'm pretty sure you had as long of entry.
Yeah.
But you could haul as fast as you go around there.
Yeah.
And he ended up having a pretty substantial lead over Allison, I think, at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But he could have came down, which the black flag says report to your pits.
Yeah.
And won it.
Man, interesting. You retired from NASCAR after the 2019 Daytona 500.
I was laid off from NASCAR.
But you were laid off after the first race of the year in 2019. Something don't feel right about that.
You would have to talk to them. There was 50 people laid off that day.
Really? After the Daytona 500?
It had happened in January.
Oh, sorry.
They offered me an opportunity to do the 500.
Okay.
And
you did it?
I did it, but before I would agree to do it, I wanted to think about it. And I would say some of it is just business.
Yeah.
And leave it at that. I was offered a severance package. I sit there and weighed it out. I said, okay, I can go to Daytona and try to make some connections on some other opportunities, whether say goodbye to a bunch of people that I had worked with for 30-some years.
Yeah.
And the way I put it, I got to play at the Masters one more time.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I never looked at what I did on Sundays as a real job.
Right.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sometimes stressful, but you would do a bunch of stuff leading up to it to do this. All jobs have stuff that you don't want to do. Mm-hmm. Other things, there's parts of enjoyment. You don't want to go test for 3 hours,
right?
But you want to go race for 2 hours.
Yeah.
Okay. So same thing. So I just agreed to do that. I went down there and I put just as much effort in that one as I did in the first one.
You really didn't get a explanation of what boxes you weren't checking for them, or?
No.
Yeah.
No, and
was there anything going on the year before that led you to believe that they were not satisfied? Or?
No, I would go back and look at my job evaluations, and it was like a scale of 4 to 5 on 5.
Yeah,
a little bit over 4, had been there for years, received bonuses. I can't tell you why. I would question the decision on why did you want this much experience to walk out the door. Mm-hmm. When one of the things I think that has reared its ugly head is the crew that they have in race control right now is very limited on experience. They have nobody other than Tim Berman, who is a solid race director, that's worked his way up doing different jobs around the racetrack. Mm-hmm. You've taken people and you put them in there and said, well, sink or swim.
Yeah.
Okay. I can't, I don't know why. I had written a proposal to them on how to train a half a dozen people and whatever, but in my search, I wanted people from the short track area that had several years of experience doing different things. I will relate to Clay Campbell. Mr. Earls, his grandfather, made Clay do every job at Martinsville Speedway growing up, whether it's whitewashing fences, not painting them, whitewashing them, taking a sickle out off of a hill and cleaning the bush, laying brick block for bathrooms or whatever. He had to do it. He knows the facility inside out, and that's why he's one of the better promoters we have out there today, if not one of the absolute best that's still doing it. I hold the promoters, Humpy Wheeler, Clay Campbell, Bob Baird, and Ed Clark in high regard because they had such a history in there. The rest of them now are, and I'm not trying to be negative, but they're more of the marketeer. They don't have the operational backgrounds that these guys have, and whatever. But when you do all the steps from right there, if your dad had you out at the shop cleaning lug nuts when you were 5 or 6, you have a better appreciation of what it takes to put that car back together than some of the drivers right now. If on Monday morning some of these car owners say, be at the shop at about 9 o'clock and clean this thing out, then clean the hauler out, you might drive it a little different.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. So after Daytona, what was your plan of action?
Well, I hadn't had a plan. I had a plan of working till I was about 70. Mm-hmm. No particular reason, and I'm coming up on that. I went back and did some weekly races at a couple of tracks, and then.
How did you feel about that? Was that did you enjoy that as much as I think you did?
I enjoy it, but I will tell you it's not as challenging because, and I say that with all respect.
Yeah.
There's not as many procedures involved. So I did that. I took my knowledge of the rule book and offered it to teams to come out and speak to them about the rules. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
Well, I'll use the selling point at the time was the year that I think Harvick had the 10 wins. Mm-hmm. He didn't have about 7 penalties that year. He was 15 penalties less than the next nearest car by studying it that way. If you're not spending time on that pit road or lining up to the rear, you're helping yourself. So basically, if you know the rule book and how the officials are interpreting it, you may get yourself out of a penalty because you know the rule. When you start deviating the rules, that's when you get into it. I sit there and you're talking about rules. Go back to Nashville. I'm still scratching my head with the Busch call. You made something fairly simple very complicated by giving him his spot back.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was crazy.
It is crazy, but then you're sitting there, okay, and I don't get to order the races right anymore. You're going to go to a street course where you know you're going to get blocked. The call was never somewhere there's somebody blocked at that street course. You go to a road course at Watkins Glen. That rule was not put in. Why was the rule put in there? And who made it? Doesn't matter who made the call was made.
Yeah.
Okay. So knowing the reasons behind and whatever, and then applying those rules, I did that for a couple of years, and then I felt like, okay, I'm somewhat outdated because I'm not playing the game every week.
Yep.
I'm watching it, but I don't have the ins and outs of the rule book and how it's worded and how it's changed. So I can't see how to apply everything or what's the rationale. So to me, my advantage. Then I went in for 3 years. I did some work with Trans Am, and in the meanwhile, I've rewritten a couple of rule books looking for errors and stuff to make it read clearer, because you'll read it one way and I'll read it another.
100%.
Let's find middle ground that's easily understood and take out all the legalese if we can.
Yeah. So you're content. Where are you in terms of content? Do you have closure on your career with NASCAR? Are you able to kind of mend those fences a little bit? Or I know it's not been that many years since that all went down. I had no idea how you felt about it emotionally, but I sense that you were a little bit disappointed about the decision when it happened. But I want to know, I guess, if you've made some peace with it.
Well, I think I have to make peace with it, regardless if I like it. I would say for 20 years, and this was never guaranteed, but you were, quote, in a family atmosphere with a family business. And as the family business evolved into a corporation, a lot of the family aspect was being stripped away.
Yeah.
There was this kind of unwritten saying, you don't retire from NASCAR, you die from NASCAR. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I was perfectly content doing what I was doing. I enjoyed it. I felt like I was doing a reasonable job and whatever. So to have this, you're right. All of a sudden, my plan doesn't align with their plan for whatever reason. So I go home, I tell my wife, and try to figure out what's the next step. I will tell you, I miss not doing what I was doing at that level. Because like I said, that was my golf game. Mm-hmm. I miss a lot of the friends that I'd made. And you gotta remember back that some of these people I'd worked with at 30 years. You get to know people when you're out at a racetrack at 2 o'clock in the morning watching something be repaired so we can use it the next day. It to me, it shows that you care about them, you care about the job that they do, and you have the respect to be out there. And sometimes it's just no fun. And I would have liked to have said goodbye to the group that I didn't get to see.
Yeah.
I kind of regret that, but on the same token, I can't travel to 18 different racetracks, and there's been so much turnover in the industry now. I don't know how many of them would be there.
They'll be there, yeah.
So you miss that. I still watch it. I get on a text chain, and it just galls me to watch 10-lap cautions.
Yeah.
I watched the one the other night that ran 10 laps into one of the stages, and I said, okay, quit shortening the second stage because you can't get it cleaned up.
Yeah.
I like I said, I'm not a big proponent of stage racing. I understand part of it. When I was there, I did all I could do to officiate the rule book to the rules. That my personal feeling to the rule doesn't do that. doesn't enter into it. This is what the rule is, and you go from there. I think there's several other rules in there that I'd love to see them get rid of.
Yeah.
I'm very leery of the damaged vehicle policy.
Yeah.
Screwing up something in Phoenix.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Good.
It's going to be the only way to put it is just be a damn shame.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's true. We saw a scenario this past couple of weekends where that might, with the 19 car, the 12 car Blaney at Watkins Glen and things like that, But
I think in that it's the people that have put these rules in place haven't taken the necessary steps to peel through all the layers of what can happen.
The repercussions.
Because they're not as experienced as what was there 15 or 20 years ago. When Pemberton and Darby and Helton and I were there, that was over 100 years of racing experience in one room.
Yeah.
We probably saw it. Don't mean that we necessarily remembered it.
Yeah.
But we'd probably seen it before.
Well, David, it's been a great conversation, man, and I've always wanted to sit down and talk to you. As I mentioned earlier in the conversation, I always had a lot of respect for you. And you had kind of become you were certainly respected and appreciated in the industry and the garage. Fans even were aware of who you were and loved your me and TJ used to joke about your put it out, when the cautions would come out, when the caution was necessary. I always just enjoyed the way you managed the show. And
well, I appreciate that.
There were times when there's times when your competitiveness gets the best of you, but I never worried about there being a mistake. I don't think many of us ever worried about that when you were in the booth. We knew that you had your idea of how it should be and how it was going to go. I think we all knew exactly what to expect when we got up that Sunday to race, and knew we weren't going to get any preferential treatment. Everybody was going to get treated the same.
Well, it was one of the things that I always tried to do, and I never really wanted to get close to the drivers. I would try to officiate. It's the 17 car.
Yeah.
It's not Busher. It's not Kenseth when he was in the It's the 17 car. Now, granted, a human's driving it. A team is putting it together. But 17 is an inanimate deal.
Yeah.
Take the personality out of it. And we can both agree to disagree, and we can sit there. I appreciate the compliment about no mistakes, but we made mistakes. I would make mistakes and be just lividly mad at myself, not anybody else. And I would have somebody walk up, "Oh, you did a great job." And I'm sitting there biting my tongue out. "No, you dummy, you just did this, and you shouldn't have done that." And they were oblivious to what had happened. Because I think no more, they weren't watching the race.
Yeah.
So, it was always trying to be fair, even, level-headed. Now, when I'd unkey the radio, I would probably be subject to some of the fines that you were subject to when we went to broadcast television. But and I would be questioning somebody's intelligence, and I'd key the radio back up, and it's back to business as normal. But and I didn't never. Like I said, I thought in any good officiating, they put the race back into the race. Don't sit there and drag this thing out. If it's going to take a long time, stop it. If you can clean it up quickly, do it. Work at it. Be efficient at it. Go back racing. That's what the people came to watch.
For sure.
It is far more complicated today in ways that it shouldn't be. I would love to see the day, and you can't put the stuff back in a can, but there's too much technology. Mm-hmm. And just let the guys have some fun.
Yeah, sure.
I
be creative.
I be creative, but I look down there on the grid, and the drivers, they don't appear like they're having fun.
Yeah.
I mean, and let's face it, most of them, if you told them, hey, go get a real job and find out what that's like, you'd find out you got a pretty good deal here, but you've never had a real job, but you're not looking like you're enjoying this the way you should.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't realize how miserable I was till I got done and got out of it, and then I realized how much I didn't appreciate it. Mm-hmm. I'm sitting here now going, why did I make that so damn hard? Why was I so miserable about that? I hated testing. I'd give anything to go back and slap myself around and say, enjoy testing. One day you don't get to test no more. Mm-hmm. But
well, I think the lack of testing, and especially in Xfinity and trucks, somebody needs to revisit the amount of practice they're getting.
Yeah.
A set of tires is a lot cheaper than a race vehicle.
Yeah.
Well,
the way they make the tires now, you can run all day on a set, but that's another thing.
we won't go down that path. I mean,
yeah. But I mean, I posted a social media tweet the other day about Charlotte Speedway. I was just reading an old program and just found this to be interesting. For the 500 miler in 1981, just a random example of a race weekend. Of course, we ran 28 races a year, so we had some off weekends in between many of the races. They would come in on Sunday, have a 5-hour open practice. They would have another practice on Tuesday, another practice on Wednesday, qualify top 15. Thursday, they'd practice again, qualify 16th through 30th. And then Saturday after the Xfinity race, they'd have another final practice and get the last 10 cars qualified in. And by the end of the week, there was over 15 hours of track time for the Grand National Cup cars. And no one thought that was crazy. And they weren't mowing through 20 sets of tires. They were probably teams out. And the thing is like, they would flip the light on and the track would go green on Tuesday for 5 hours. Guys were just kind of petering in and out. Some people might not even be there. Not everybody was just flying out onto the racetrack running hundreds of miles. They were just piddling and playing because they knew they had all week to sort through it. But you had so much track time. Therefore, you had people that wanted to be there to see it. Therefore, you had people camping all weekend. And, it was an event that you brought your family to because there was always something happening.
Yeah.
And these days, it's, we all get in there at the last minute to try to get in there and run the race and get out of there at the quickest amount of time. And so we've shortened up the entire, experience in terms of a race weekend that almost be unrecognizable to me and you. And I certainly miss it. Practice, when I first started broadcasting, we had a little bit of practice, and it was such a great storyteller and helping me understand, what the weekend might look like, or what the race might look like. And it built storylines on this guy was really fast. And, this guy who's usually not fast was fast today in practice. Let's watch him in the race, see if he gets an unusually good finish. But man, no matter how much we talk about it and we can go in circles, things are just going to keep on changing, and it's out of our hands.
The evolution's always going to be there, or go to Daytona on the Wednesday before the 500 and be down there for 10 days.
Yes, that was amazing.
And that racetrack, now I will say this, I learned to hate lights because you went from a pretty structured day at 5 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock.
Now you're there all day.
All day and all night.
Yeah.
Okay. Back in the day, come about 5 or 6 o'clock, especially in the fall, it was dark.
Yeah.
You quit. Okay. So then you could go out. You could have some fun. You could have some dinner. You could interact with the local community and build your fan base. Mm-hmm. You're in and out and whatever. Today, the evolution is not that. It's simulation. Simulation, to me, kind teaches some, I won't say bad habits, but you have a respect more ways than one now, and I don't bring up a dark time in your life of what hitting a wall will mean. The do generation, it's not there.
Yeah.
I remember, and your case is well documented, but go back to when Jeff Gordon hit the wall at Texas. It was probably 2 years before he was running, quote, like the Jeff Gordon of old.
Yeah.
Out of probably this newfound respect for what that wall did. Safer barriers, simulation, and lack of track time has taken all that away from them.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's kind of like intermediate tracks. Everybody says it's so much better. I don't know that it's all that much better. We just don't run them as many times.
Yeah.
I would be remiss if I didn't say I'm concerned about short tracks.
Me too.
Because it didn't matter what you had back in the day, whether it was a bad restrictors plate set up or whatever, you could always go back and find a baseline at a short track and have a good race.
Yes. Because
it didn't require aerodynamics, and it just required some nerves. But, you know.
Yeah, we talked about that on our show yesterday. That I'm very worried about the short tracks in the short term, because we lost a race to Richmond. If the races were exciting at Richmond, they would not be taking a race away from that track. Well, we lost a race to that track. If the racing at Martinsville and Bristol don't soon turn the corner, and no pun intended, and start producing some real, true excitement. Just 5 years ago, we had that race where Denny Hamlin and Chase Elliott were duking it out and cussing each other on pit road. I left that racetrack going, if we could bottle this every week, it would be to the moon. This is what NASCAR is all about. You won't have that race at Martinsville right now with the way things are with the car and all. So it's a concern for me that instead of eventually finding the solution that makes short track racing exciting, we will just lose short track racing and go to where the racing is exciting today, right? Instead of trying to resolve the issue, we'll just move away from it.
I thought Watkins Glen and Atlanta were two really good races.
Yeah.
Okay. I would be concerned at Watkins Glen, not because it's Watkins Glen, but when Ambrose and Keselowski raced the race up there, for whatever reason, they're racing from curb to curb, from infield to infield, and it could have been that the racetrack was slick, the tires were whatever, but it made this emphasis, we've got to have 5 more
of those.
Yeah. It's produced 2 of them in 15 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It was a great race. You'd go back and watch those 2 races. You'd watch the race a couple of weeks back. Atlanta the same way. But what had we been watching at Atlanta for 15 years? You can't go back in time. I liked Atlanta when it was a true oval.
I did too. I wish I never got to run on it before they put the dog leg in it.
Mm-hmm.
I went there a lot when I was a little boy.
I'm sure
Dad.
you did.
Dad was very good there, and I never got to run on. And what a neat thing that would be today to have a 1.5 mile true oval. It doesn't exist. Every oval that's a 1.5 miles has a dog leg, has a bend. You would have a one-off that no one else could replicate in the rest of the country. And the other thing about I'll go back to short track racing. We had this sort of run on 1.5 mile tracks. We had a run on some short tracks here recently where they've added quite a few to the schedule. Short track racing about 5 years ago, as I mentioned, was thrilling, and there was no run on short tracks, which is frustrating for me. We did get Wilkesboro back, but boy, that was like moving a mountain.
I wish we could age Will, and I've been fortunate enough to help them up there on something. I wish we could age the surface
of Wilkesboro.
to speed up what it's capable of showing.
It will do that, I think.
It will, and Steve Swift and his team will do everything because it will do that.
Yeah, it needs a big race. It needs a long race. The All-Star race, the short track package, and Wilkesboro is not the best combination for the success of that facility. 400 lap long race with the way they use turn 1 and 2 and move up the racetrack, and they can actually move around the corner in 3 and 4 as well. It's multi-groove. I think it would serve it better having a 400 lap event rather than the shorter sprint style event that the All-Star race is, because you just can't really get into what makes short track racing great in that brief of a race.
Do you think Enoch Staley and Jack Combs had any knowledge of parabolic racetracks when they graded?
Yeah,
because it's truly parabolic.
Yeah, it is
the way it is, but man, it produces great racing.
Yeah, it does. I'm glad it's back. All right, man. I've really appreciated this conversation. David, thanks for spending some time with us today. Glad to hear you're keeping yourself busy, and thanks for just coming and sharing some stories with us and your point of view. I mean, it's important to your point. You got all the experience, and you're sitting there with a non-biased opinion about where the sport is today, and willing to share it. And I'm thankful for that. So I appreciate you.
Glad to be here, and I hope everybody enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure they did. David Hoots on the Dale Jr. Download. All right, that was a great conversation with David Hoots. And, guy, I didn't think I'd ever get to talk to him about his job in the sport, because I thought he would always be doing it. To his point, he always thought he'd be doing it too till he retired. But I didn't know, I guess, that he was as kind of taken aback or surprised by his being laid off. And it was just fun kind of taking a peek at what the racetrack and what racing and what doing the job is like. I've seen this sport from so many perspectives, but that definitely isn't one I've been able to enjoy. And so it's kind of cool to get him in here and to get us a peek behind the curtain as to how things work. And I hope y'all enjoyed it. David's still out there working in the regional level, helping with some of the Smart Tour stuff or what have you. And he's staying pretty busy and still making an impact in a good way in motorsports around this area. So just thankful for him. Thankful for Ally bringing us the guest segment every single week, no matter what you're saving for, whether it's a race tickets to the next race or a new car, maybe a home. We're all better off with an Ally. All right, it's time for the white flag, dropping Sunday after the race to tear down with Jeff Gluck and Jordan Bianchi. They covered everything they witnessed and saw at Bristol. Some strong opinions about the product at short track racing, and also some strong opinions from Denny Hamlin on actions detrimental this week on Monday. Denny got down with some of the information about what he thinks can be maybe the solution or where the problems may lie with the short track package. We've all danced around this for months and months about what it might be, tires, the car, maybe it's a combination of a lot of different things, but hopefully somebody's going to find the answer. Door Bumper Clear dropped Monday as well. The spotters going round and round about what they experienced this past weekend. TJ talking a lot about his experiences spotting for us at the Xfinity race on Friday night. Dirty Air, we talked about that as well, having TJ on the show yesterday. A fun Dirty Air show with TJ as a co-host. And then dropping today's Speed Street with Connor Daly and Chase Holden. Tomorrow, DJD Reloaded with Ask Junior and more. Ask Junior was hilarious. I don't know how it might come across listening to it, but damn it, I had a lot of fun. And Dirty Modo comes out tomorrow as well. They'll feature all the great bets to be making on the upcoming race this weekend in Kansas. Remember to leave us a 5-star Apple review. We will read those on the show, so leave us a review, please. Here's one that we just recently got. I asked you guys to write us a few, and here's one we had from last week. I've been listening for several years now, and the show continues to evolve and grow. The guests are top-notch, and you can hear Dale's genuine interest and investment in their story. Thank you very much. It's a great review. You know what? There's no name here.
from like Junior Fan 123.
Yeah,
or something.
so I think if we're going to ask people to write the 5-star review, we ought to at least have their name so they can go, hey, all right, he read my review. What was it? Junior. It's going to be Junior. It's Junior 527309.
No, it's Dale Junior Fan 308.
All right, Dale Junior Fan 308.
308th fan.
Or they're from the 308 area code.
You're right.
All right. Well, that's the show. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you tomorrow on DJD Reloaded.